back. Okay. Thank you everybody for coming. We're very excited to be here tonight. Thank you, Carolina, for the pictures. Very good friend of ours, of the family, Eliza and myself, Michael Weiss. He's agreed to do this, and we just want to thank him very much for being here. I'd like to give him a round of applause. We are waiting on batteries, but Craig is going to bless us as soon as he's ready. Or maybe I'll just say the blessing. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing these young adults together tonight. We thank you for Michael Weiss and his guidance for us here. We ask you to continue blessing the young adults in this ministry and bring more young adults to the church. We thank you for being there for us, and we would continue to thank you as we grow in our faith and in our careers. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Yeah, we'll share.
Okay, we just kick it off that way.
Just want to start off by saying congratulations again, Mr. Weiss, or
Michael.
He finally blessed me to call him Michael like last week. Was voted Forbes Best in State Wealth Advisor for 2021.
So,
But also, what, is that a
well, you're over
back-to-back?
Yeah, it is back to back. So, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about accolades, but one of the best financial advisors in the state of Connecticut. Not the best, because there has to be. Yeah. So, anyway, let me tell you what a pleasure it is to be here. First of all, many of you may not know this, but I have been coming to Walnut Hill Community Church, which was previously Grace Community Church, since it was a 50, 60 person service at the South Street School in 1984. So 37 years I've been hanging around one campus or another. And I remember when we went from one service to two services, because we went from 50 people to 100 people. I remember when we had to buy a panel truck and take the cribs in and out every Sunday, and that was a ministry in itself. Is that we had a little panel truck and we were allowed to park it somewhere. I don't even remember, I wasn't part of it. And the reason I came to church was because it was a prerequisite to date the woman who I ended eventually married, because you couldn't really go to church if you couldn't really be around the house if you weren't going to church. So, and it was also an instant ticket to a little bit of pot roast on Sunday, because you get invited for dinner after you, and I like dinner, so. And just to kind of touch on the family relationship between Josh and Eliza, Eliza has been a friend of my family's, and I consider her a second daughter, since she was, for at least, well, I know how old she is, so let's say at least 25 years. And her daughter, Eliza, and my daughter met at, it was either ballet or piano or something like that. And I have these fond memories of sitting in my house. You know, dads can't really say any no or deny their daughters anything, but Eliza and Jenny used to try to put braids in my hair. And I would literally sit on the stairs and they would get behind me with these little braids. And my hair wasn't much longer than it is now, but somehow they got those little braids in my hair. So I have that fond memory. And I think it's wonderful that she has such a wonderful husband who I approve of. So with that, let's get down to business.
Thank you. So before we start, let's just jump right into it. Why don't you tell us how you got into financial management? How did you see this as a career when you were growing up? And let's start right there.
Okay, so it would be fair to say the answer to that question is no. I did not see this as my original career. Maybe you could call it somewhat of an accidental blessing. When I got my first job, it was over on North Street at the McDonald's there. You know, that McDonald's that's opposite by Burlington, right? So my first job was March 31st of 1981, and my job was to sweep the sidewalks of that McDonald's, mop the sidewalk of that McDonald's, and pick up all the litter in the parking lot. That was my first job, and I did that for a number of months. And worked my way up from there to filling the ice buckets and doing all this kind of stuff, and the overnight porter, and 2 years later I was the assistant night manager, and so on and so forth, and actually worked very hard at McDonald's, started college, McDonald's sent me off to, nobody laughed now, but they sent me to Hamburger University. And while that does get a little chuckle, it's probably some of the finest training in the world about standards and management and so on and so forth. So I count that as a blessing. But I realized that the guy that I was working for, who was just a few years older than me, had a problem with drugs and alcohol, and was 3 or 4 years older than me and had a bleeding ulcer, and it just wasn't the life that I wanted for Linda and I. And so I started looking elsewhere. So I was in McDonald's as a management training track to where you would eventually be a restaurant manager. And so there's two things about this. One is how I met my wife, which there are varying stories about how wonderful I was, which is my version, and then her version where she went home and said, I work for a jerk. So there is that. I guess you found the batteries. But
Craig, you got it.
so I was working at McDonald's.
Sorry guys,
We got it now. So anyway, so I was working at McDonald's, a franchise, and had lots of responsibility. Was moving along. I was starting to make a reasonable amount of money for a 19-year-old, 20-year-old guy at the time. I met this wonderful woman, fell in love with her, wanted to get married, realized this is not the place that I wanted to build my family on. Started looking for opportunities in management, because I was doing management, so why not continue that? And so I found a entry-level position in a financial services management training program. And 36 years ago, come May 17th, I started working there. And that was a long time ago. So that's where it started, but it was a little bit by accident that I went and ended up in financial services. And from there, I worked at that company, which is called First Investors Corporation. I was there for approximately 12 years and worked up to where there were approximately 3,000 registered representatives in the country. And I left there in the number 2 spot in the United States because I left there, and I remember that my boss, or my boss's boss's boss, who I had a good relationship with said, it's time for you to go. And the reason it was time for me to go is not because I was a bad guy or anything like that. I actually did a lot of speaking there, I did a lot of training, so on and so forth. But I needed to go because I was outgrowing that company. They didn't do the stuff that I wanted to do. Which, if you see in our presentation today, I wrote down a couple of notes that I wanted to share with you. And one of them is that careers grow and things happen well, but you have to have this. And Josh, just read this line right here.
Constant learning.
Constant learning, right? So there's a little bit out of order, but that's been a track record, or part of my track record is constantly learning. So I literally outgrew this one particular firm, and now the business that I run, which had 3,000 people, the firm that I was with before had 3,000 people, and now the little group that I run of 5 does 1/3 the business that entire 3,000 people did just 25 years ago. So constantly learning and constantly growing. So anyway, I left First Investors Corporation, then I went to a firm called Payne Weber. You might have heard of Payne Weber, which was eventually acquired by UBS, and then UBS sent me to school, which was a big deal. More constant learning, right? And then they sent me to business school a number of times, 3, 4 times. They sent me to University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School of Business, Advanced Finance stuff, and then they sent me to University of Chicago. And then I switched firms there because we had some issues with management, and so we left there, and then we moved to Morgan Stanley, and then Morgan Stanley sent me more school. And believe it or not, I was in school 16 hours this week. Part of Monday, all day Tuesday, part of yesterday, and 2 hours today before I came here. So always learning, always learning. So, and that's kind of been how my career started. It was a little bit by accident because I didn't want to work every other Sunday and every Saturday. Not that I'm afraid of work, because we're going to talk about that, but it wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted. And I accidentally got into financial services because I wanted to be in management. And then from there, I just loved it because it's never the same job every day. Because it's a different market, a different client, a different prospect, a different problem, a different need, a different success, a different victory, a different loss, a different whatever. Every single day is literally different, and I like that, so I don't know if that helps.
So, can you turn this down? Or pull it down? Is that better? Before we sat down, I had a list here of things that we were gonna go in order and you kind of were like, let's do away with that and just talk. You know, one thing that really gets me going is learning about, you know, the hustle, you know, how people get up and work every day, how many hours they work, you know, the grind. It really, you know, inspires me to keep moving forward. Can you drop a little knowledge for the young adults here and tell us, you know, what it's like to get to a VP position? Like, what does it take to get to that level?
Yes. So first of all, I'm going to apologize because this may rustle some feathers. Okay, but I have a reputation for being straight. I was saying to Josh before that I used to say that I worked from 5 a.m. on Monday till 5 a.m. on Monday. I mean, I a little bit different than many other jobs, but I have never had a salary. I have always been on 100% commission, what I generated entirely myself for 36 years. And while that drove my father crazy, because my father had to show up at 7:30 in the morning, leave at 3:30 in the afternoon, clock hours, overtime kind of a job, he didn't understand what it was like to go totally entrepreneurial and so on and so forth. And I will tell you that I would never have done it differently, but that's the right thing for my personality. So I'm kind of 24/7, 365, but I do take vacations very, very good. Liza's been on vacation with me. She knows that I know how to vacation.
You sent us on vacation.
That's right, man. That was a good vacation. One of my favorite spots. So, work ethic is one of the main things I learned from my father. Because many times I'd get up in the morning and he was already gone. And sometimes when I was a youngster, I'd come home and he was in bed already because he had to be up early because he had to go to work. And so the number one thing that I think that has the knowledge I would drop is that you have to distinguish yourself to get ahead. And one of the things that I don't like about some millennials is that you clock in at 8 or at 7:30, you're ready to go at 8. Or you're ready to go at 7:30, not clocking in at 8, not clocking in at 7:30, you're ready to go. Like Eric over here has students show up in his class. You're ready to go when they walk in, right? You're prepared ahead of time. It's not like, it's 8 o'clock, I'm gonna show up for my class, right? Because those kids will eat you alive, right? Well, the employer wants to see you on time. My father used to have this thing, he used to say, if you're not early, you're late. And I've never been late. It was within my control. And you know how many times I've been late where I didn't call and say, hey, I just got into an accident or there's traffic or whatever. So one of the things that this wisdom I would drop is that you need to distinguish yourself by being on time, the most eager. And just because your shift ends at 4 o'clock, that doesn't mean you're standing at a time clock at 4 o'clock. You leave when the job's done. You leave when the job's done. I don't believe, you ever stay a little late, take care of a student?
Not to take care of a student, but definitely.
Yeah, to do some stuff, all right? And I will tell you, if you're looking to get an opportunity to get ahead, to get a little bit more responsibility, to maybe get extra hours, to get a promotion, who are they gonna pick? The one that was late or the one that was on time, early, and ready to go? Rhetorical. Are they gonna give the opportunity to the person who maybe did a little studying on their own? I think so, all right? The one who maybe stayed a little bit later. That's a very, very important thing, is you need to be the first one ready to go. I remember I got a job, so I switched this job, switched jobs to go into this commission thing that was driving my father crazy. And I got a job with one of my father's buddies who had a painting company, and because I needed to save money for my honeymoon. And so he gave me a job Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays from 8 a.m. to noon, just 3 days a week, helping him with his painting business. So, Mr. Daria. And he said to me, we start at 8 o'clock, be ready to go at 8 o'clock. So I showed up at 20 to 8, right? First day, because I didn't want to be late. I had my own coffee. I was ready to go at 20 to 8. The regular crew showed up at 8:05. And I remember him pulling me aside, because that was his full-time guys, and pulling me aside, he says, I wish there were more guys like your dad, more guys like you who show up on time, right? And that's the kind of, if you want to be ahead, you need to do that. And one of my issues right now with millennials, and I get, millennials is a poor choice of words, but that demographic from say 25 to 45, they want somebody to hand them something. They want to clock in it exactly and know what the benefits are going to be. I do a lot of interviewing. People are always sending me resumes. Can I be your intern? Can we do this? Can you do that? You know, they Google these things in the newspaper and they find out who the financial advisor or whatever recognition is in Ridgefield. And all of a sudden I get flooded with a dozen resumes. And they're all saying to me, well, not that, hey, I want to show up on time and I want to do anything that I can to get in the door, but so what kind of development program do you have and how much time off do I get? Right? And I'm hearing some laughter, but it's true. Right? And one more thing I want to add in there. There's a question in here where Josh asked me, what was the best advice I was ever given? And I'm not sure where the advice ever came from. But integrity and ethics. Because you may not be, I'm probably not the smartest financial advisor on the planet. There's lots of other people who are probably really good at it, all right? But I'm the most honest. My group, I have a group, those partners and myself, we've been together for over 25 years, and we have this slogan that always take the high road, regardless of the consequences. We always do that. And I don't know how many times I've made mistakes, all right? But you fess up to your mistake, you fix the mistake, and the mistake goes behind, all right? Have you ever made a mistake and then didn't say anything about it? And then the person finds out and they're like, wait a second. You knew about this and you didn't say anything, right? Just yesterday, we were supposed to pay one of our clients' daughter's mortgages in January, February, March, and April. I wrote it down on the instructions on my notes, but I forgot to do it. So I just spent $1,000 out of my pocket to pay for the back mortgage fees that the client's daughter was paid in New Jersey. Now, I made a mistake. You know what? The slate is clean. I made a mistake, I fessed up, I fixed it, we move on. So integrity, work ethic, doing the right thing, those are the kind of things, regardless of the career or industry that you're in, those are the things that propel people to greatness and to significant things and growth over time. So, I don't know if that helps. I hope it does.
It was good for me. So I have a list of questions here that I think most young adults face today. And, you know, questions that we need help with. I know I've had these questions for myself. And I've actually ran them by you, ran them by my father, ran them by other adults that I think have money. So I'm just like, let me ask that guy. So let's just go, I'm gonna go through a few of these. Lease, should you lease or buy a car?
So there's a math part to that, right? And then there is what fits in your life part to that, okay? But before you talk about lease versus buy, I would ask yourself a question. Is that 325i really, really what you need?
Oh, that was gonna be my second part to that.
Okay, so, you know, I've talked many people out of buying cars because it was just plain not a smart idea. Okay, and sometimes I tell people to say, no, I can't buy this, and they throw me under the bus. They say my financial advisor says I can't do it, so they don't have to disappoint their other person. But, so lease versus buy. So if you're the type, does anybody here actually understand what a lease is? Do you mind if I just, all right, mind if I just kind of give a 10,000-foot view? So a lease is basically where you pay for the part of the car that you're going to use. All right, and then you finance and pay for the interest of the carrying cost of the part that you're not going to use as a present value carry forward, right? So you pay less money. So let's just say you're going to buy a vehicle that's $30,000 and it's anticipated its residual value will be $20,000. Well, what is that $10,000 worth? Well, $10,000 with a bit of a time value of money. Boom, boom, boom. You're paying for $10,000 over 4 years. It should be $275, $300 a month. Right? And then there's the time value of the $20,000 in capital that's tied up. So if you really need that car, let's say, for example, you need to get to work, and you can't afford to buy the thing, then let's lease it. But then let's figure out a way to save the money so that 3 years from now you can buy that car, the rest of the car. So I happened to lease cars early in my career when I didn't have as much money, and now I just buy them. All right. So, but if you're going to be a low mileage user who wants to get rid of, change cars all the time, this is more applicable to like 70-year-old women, okay, who drive 8,000 miles a year. They should be leasing vehicles. I would think that you guys right now should be buying your cars, all right? Especially since everybody wants to go somewhere on the weekend and you're probably gonna hold it for a long time. I will tell you this, right now is a good time to borrow money. Not that I think that anybody should be borrowing money just for the sake of borrowing money, but interest rates are very low. So if you're gonna borrow money when the price is cheap. All right, there's this thing called OPM. Anybody know what OPM stands for?
Other people money.
Other people's money. Who said that?
Pedro in the back.
Yeah, other people's money. So I just wanted to acknowledge the person who said it. So, so I'm a big fan of that if you can. So borrow money as cheap as you can. But then again, you know, I prefer if you didn't buy the 325i 14 minutes outside of school.
So I recently saw something online where a guy was talking about debit cards and credit cards. And I don't use credit cards, never have. And I was always scared because I didn't want to rack up a credit card that I couldn't pay for. And I always use debit. You know, I don't have many bills, everything I pay for fully. And this guy kind of turned my opinion around and said, you should be using a credit card because one, you get points, and two, if something happens, it's not your money, it's their money. And why should I put my money at risk when I can use their money? What do you think?
So first thing there is kind of a discipline question, right? All right, and understand that the same answer doesn't apply to everybody. But the person with the credit card has to have the discipline that the same person who didn't buy the 325 has, right? So if you have the discipline to pay off the credit card every single month, then that's what you should do, okay? Because right now, it's a little bit different from a time value of money perspective, but in the past, if you had a little bit of money in a debit card, well, that's debited right away, so you're not getting any interest on that money, right? Back when interest rates were higher, that made more of a difference. Right now, it makes no difference because 0.001 times whatever means nothing, right? So that's important. But there's also a thing going on that the world is changing, right? I like to pay cash for things, right? But it's hard to pay cash for things. So to Josh's point, I just paid for an entire trip out west to go fly fishing, all on points. So there's a resource there that's there for you. So if you are an American Express person or you get the Visa card from Costco and you can use those points, they add up over time. I would encourage you to do that. There's the record keeping, right? Everybody here is on the internet, right? Download into QuickInch, you know, all your things, right? I was helping my mother-in-law with her taxes this afternoon. We didn't know what was going on with her charitable contributions. Well, I went into her bank account. I downloaded into PDF, into Excel, boom, sorted it, boom, I knew everything within a matter of minutes. So you want to know there, you know, years ago, you didn't have those benefits, but now the benefits are going that way. And I will tell you that, you know, probably 10 years from now, cash is going to be a problem, all right? You're going to find that cash is disappearing more and more and more, and they'll be like, where did you get that cash from? All right? So I don't like that. That's a whole nother story. But I would encourage you to be smart about credit. All right?
I think most of us here are past our college years, or maybe in college and about to graduate. But I'm hoping this video is going to get to some kid that is graduating high school. And what would your advice be to a person who's graduating high school and about to go to college, or somebody who's going to go back to college that is going to take on a massive amount in loans to go get a degree?
So a couple things come to mind. One is that there is evidence that if you're going to go to college to become a professional, as opposed to go to college to become, okay, it's going to sound really critical, but if you're going to go be a philosophy major and end up working as a bank teller, you probably should have just become a bank teller. Okay? there's a lot of comparisons in the news where they say, hey, you know, you can go to technical school, right? Go to technical school. That would be great. So you've got to get some kind of training. One of the things that I think people should consider is, even though there's a big debate right now with the present administration about free education and all that kind of stuff, that's going to take a while to work its way through. So you right there, right? This person right here, I'm talking to the guy that's looking at this, who maybe is going to go to college. Maybe what you do is you go to a state school, whether it be a community college or a Western or something like that, and get the first year or two done. Because to be frank, remember first year or two of college, what did you study?
Electives.
Not what's on the cue cards, people. No, you studied reading, writing, maths, all that kind of stuff. Well, unless you're going to Harvard, it's really the same stuff. All right? It's the same textbook. So go get that 2 years or a year and a half, depending on what it is, and then transfer. Because if you do well at Mattituck Community College, which I took classes at, all right? If you do well there, they transfer to WestCon or they transfer to UConn, and we know what a UConn education can lead to, right? Both of you, right? Both of you, right? So I would encourage you to get the education or pursue some other professional thing. All right, and this is really, really going to be controversial, but I think that if you're going to go to school, learn something that you can put into a job. All right, or something with the idea that you're going to go to graduate school. So if you think you want to be a lawyer, then study history, because history is not going to give you a job, right? You want to be a history teacher maybe? Okay, but then you got to go get a graduate degree and learn how to teach, right? You got to get a 6-year certificate. So I would say, get a technical training type of thing. Get a degree that has something in it. Like, Ryan, you have something, if I remember, from that school in New Hampshire, right? Where you learned about building houses and how to do them in a green perspective with airtight and all that kind of stuff, like when you built my house, right?
Is that lead construction?
Yeah, I went to school for architecture and focused on building science.
It's amazing what you remember, right? So, but he learned something that he could turn into a skill and into a living. So, that's what I think. I don't know if that answers your
So
question.
after you accrue this debt, right, we're out of school, now it's time to pay it back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was under the impression that I was like, I want to get this off of me. Well, really it wasn't mine because I graduated debt-free, it was my wife's. So I wanted to pay her debt off as fast as possible, and we were doubling down, and I think it was your son that was like, what are you doing? Because you could take that money that you're doubling down with, invest it, and actually make more than what you're paying off.
Yep.
Is that the advice that you would give to most people, or?
Yeah, so that's that OPM we were talking about, right? Right, OPM. So just full disclosure, Josh and Eliza are clients of my group, okay? And my son is part of my group, and so my son, Michael Jr., works with people in this demographic, okay? So, so sometimes what we do, all right, so one of the things I wrote down, so I'm jumping around a little bit, but one of the things that I always tell young people who want to have money in the future, and by the way, who knows what the two types of groups of people are when it comes to money?
Savers and spenders?
No. People with enough money and people who want to have enough money. It's that simple. You either have enough or you want to have enough, all right? Because who doesn't want to have enough money? Anybody here not want to have enough money? Okay, rhetorical question. But so one of the things, if you want to be a person who has more money in the future, is you have to do something very, very simple, but possibly difficult. You have to pay yourself first. If you bought that BMW 325i, would you miss a payment? Who thinks they'd miss a payment on a 325i? No, and then you have to pay the insurance payment, right? So who's going to miss the insurance payment? Nobody. But who here wants to be able to have a 325i of their liking without even worrying about it in their retirement and have the time to drive it? Who doesn't, right? So let's do a little bit of that, right? So the first thing I would tell this person who has this debt, and this is I think what you got from Michael, is that it's nice to pay off the debt, but let's start working on your long-term goals right away. Do a little quiz here. If you're 20 years old and you put $5,000 a year into an IRA for 10 years, then stop. Or you start at 30 and you save $5,000 a year from 30 to 60. So one scenario, you go from age 20 to 30, you put in $5,000 a year. Or from 30 to 60, and you put in $5,000 a year. Which pool of money is bigger?
20,
Starting at 20 or starting at 30?
starting at 20.
Why?
Compounding.
Compound interest.
Compound rate of return, right? By the time you get to that 100,000 that you put in the first first 50 in, it's earning more return than you're depositing when you get to the other. Okay? So you never get ahead. So what should a 21, 22, 23-year-old be doing?
Paying themselves first.
Paying themselves first. That's what you should be doing. All right? So with the paying off the debt thing, okay, if, let's say, for example, you've got $100,000 worth of debt and it's set to be paid off over 15 years, right? Not an untypical number. I once hired a young man out of Lehigh, and one of my partners said to him, "What motivates you?" And he says, "See this is my payment book for $185,000 worth of school loans. That's what motivates me to get my butt out of bed every day." He's now been in the industry 10 years. He's a CFA and he makes $500,000 a year. Okay, so take that payment and just accept it as part of your budget. And then I wouldn't necessarily double down, all right? I would look right now, there's places where you can refinance your debt and all that kind of stuff, get that interest rate down, OPM cheaper as you can, but you need to be saving money, okay? And don't ever touch that IRA. Don't ever. I don't care what it takes. Don't touch that IRA. And we'll talk about Roth IRAs versus regular IRAs in a minute. Go ahead.
My next question is gonna be about first-time home buyers buying a house, especially in today's market. I know there's a lot of people that are getting married, trying to buy a home, and they're just buying houses that are way too expensive based on the market value. Would you give advice to first-time home buyer or somebody that's trying to buy a house today?
Okay, so people often ask me what the market's gonna do, all right? And I show them my crystal ball, and it's got a crack in it. I can't tell you what the real estate market's gonna do. I remember the first time I bought my first house, this guy who was a guy from Grace Community Church said, "Real estate's great, you'll never lose any money." I paid $200,000 for that house, which I sold for $125,000 10 years later. So I can't tell you what to do with real estate prices, because they're crazy right now. And if you don't have to buy a house right now, I probably wouldn't buy a house right now, even though it flies a little bit in the face of what I told you before about other people's money and low interest rates, right? The answer that came to my mind before you were done doing the question was beg, borrow, but don't steal. As much as you can, if you can, I thought you were gonna ask me about down payments and stuff like that. So borrow something from mom, get somebody to give you a gift. Whatever you can do, all right, that's a good idea. But don't necessarily buy a house just because somebody tells you or you think you have to buy a house, okay? If you have to rent, then rent. And then maybe you pay yourself first, you put a little bit in your Roth IRA, and then you say, all right, we're gonna save X amount of our budget, and we're gonna be disciplined about it, and we're gonna take a certain amount of our budget, and we're gonna put it into this house fund. And in 3 years from now, maybe you'll have some money accumulated, and maybe prices will be more reasonable by then.
So let's go into the Roth IRA, traditional IRA, 401k,
Sure.
529.
All right, so that's different.
Okay.
All right, but so does everybody understand a basic IRA?
You should just go into it.
All right, okay, here you go. So an IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account, okay? Is an account where an individual can take a certain amount of money, up to 100% of their earned income, not to exceed $5,000. If you're over 50, you can add extra 1,000 to make it 6,000. But let's just say nobody here is over 50 except me. Is anybody here over 50? No. Oh, you look so young. Sorry, you're right. But you could take a certain amount of money. So let's just say you take that $5,000, because that's the number we used before. You take the $5,000 and you put it into an account. In an IRA, you get to deduct that. A traditional IRA, most folks get to write that money off. So that means if your paycheck was $50,000, you would put in $50,000, but on the bottom of your tax return, you would write $5,000, that would get subtracted off. So you pay tax on $5,000 less. Simple way of saying it is the money that goes into an IRA is tax deductible. Okay? Then it accumulates over the years, right? And right now, you can take it out when you're 59 and a half, 60 years old. Okay? Unreported, not taxed at all. It's a beautiful thing. All right? Someday look at the power of compounding without taxation. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Okay? And by the way, remind me about this thing about 401ks and matching contributions. Otherwise I'll get off the point. But, so IRA, money goes in tax-free, accumulates untaxed, but when it comes out, it's taxable. Now the idea is that an individual who's in their working years, their tax brackets are going up because they're making more and more money, they get the deduction up front, the money accumulates tax deferred, and it comes out tax-free. And the original plan, which is probably still true, is that most folks will be in a lower tax bracket when they retire. So if you deducted at 28 or 25, and maybe your tax bracket when you retire is 15, you got a deduction at 25 or 28, it accumulated without any tax, and then when it comes out, maybe you get to pay tax at 15. That's wonderful. A Roth IRA is exactly the opposite. Think about it. In a regular IRA, it went in tax-free, right? Well, in a Roth IRA, it's not tax deductible. So if you made 50, you put 5 in, you still pay tax on your $50,000 in income. Both of them are the same in the middle. There's no reporting. But when the Roth IRA money comes out, it comes out tax-free. That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So what I tell young folks is if your tax bracket and your income is under that $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, your tax bracket is probably 15 or 18%. So give up the 15 or 18% now, because tax brackets are going up in the future, and you'll probably make more money when you're 50 and 60 and 70 years old than you will when you're 22, 23, 25, and 30. So give up the tax break now, let it accumulate untaxed, and later on in your life, it comes out tax-free. It's a beautiful thing. Einstein used to say that one of the most amazing things in the world was compound interest. Well, I think Senator Roth got him one better, because there's nothing better than tax-free compound interest. So there is a thing called a 401k and a 403b and a 457. These are all tax codes that describe retirement plans that are all the same, except for the fact that some are for nonprofits, some are for your municipalities, and some are for public companies or private companies. All right. Basically, what they are super IRAs. All right, money goes in, tax deductible, it grows unreported and comes out tax-free. But inside of those plans, you can also have a Roth 401k or a Roth 403b. I'm not sure if there's a Roth 457, but there probably is. All right? So there's different ways to do these things, and I would encourage all of you to pay yourself first, which gets me into this idea of employer matching. Anybody work here where the employer has a match? Right? And so don't raise your hand to answer this question because it might embarrass you. But do you ever think about, I'm only going to put into the plan what they match? I hear that all the time. All right? Where they say, well, my employer only matches 3%, so I'm only putting in 3%. Well, that's a big mistake, because remember my example before about put that $5,000 in right away and the power of compounding is the benefit? It's wonderful that your employer matches. But what's more wonderful, if the employer set up the plan where they have the forced savings, where they do the discipline and they take it out of your money, out of your paycheck, and you don't even have to worry about it, and you get used to it after one paycheck. That's the important part, is all that deferral over time. All right, so 457, 457, 401k, all these different programs, they're wonderful. Put the money in there, tax, if you can afford to do it in the Roth version, you should do that. 529 plan, which Josh mentioned, because he's going to open one up soon for Olivia, is a education savings plan. The money goes in, undeductible, non-deductible, it's unreported, and then when she goes to college, right, which is 16 and a half years from now, because she's right? So she's going to be the class of 2020, she'll be the class of 2037 from high school, right?
She might get into trade.
What?
She might go into the trades.
Well, then she's still going to be educated, though. She's going to be educated, right? So a 529 is basically an account where you put money in there under tax code 529 as opposed to tax code 457 or 401k. The money goes in there, it grows unreported, but if you spend it on qualified education expenses, like for UConn or books or computers or anything like that, then all of the profits are tax-free. It's like a Roth IRA for college, even though that's not what you call it, all right? And that's not what I'm saying, it's not a Roth IRA.
All right, well,
Keep going.
we're in a church setting, so we have to switch over to some faith questions.
Mm-hmm.
How do you use faith in your job?
So, I don't know if the word is how do I use faith, but how does faith use me? Because there are different ways to approach your faith in the workplace. And there are some folks who like to be, let's just say, in your face. I'm not an in your face kind of guy. All right, so I don't walk around and say, hey, look at me, I got a Bible, I love Jesus. I don't do that. But the way I conduct myself, the ways that I deal with adversity, the way that my family meets challenges, has demonstrated to the people that know me at work that faith is everything. And so then what happens is it opens doors. So in anticipation of this question, I thought about what was appropriate to share. So about 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I still have it. And it's in complete remission. Eliza's one of the few people that knew in my family, right after, in fact, probably the first person outside of my family that knew, because Jenny went running to you. Thank you. And I have an eternal perspective on that. And my boss, who was a mixture of a Protestant who never went to church with a Jesus guy who hated God, father, after I came through my 6 months of twice-a-week chemotherapy, lost all my hair and all that kind of stuff, he pulled me aside and said, how did you do that? I would have just crumbled. How did you do that? And I just said, it's all about perspective and where your end game is. And I just said to him, I said, my perspective is on God. And then ever since then, but if I had said to him, hey, let me tell you about Jesus, and it wasn't the right time, he wasn't ready to listen, it wasn't going to happen. So faith uses me as opposed to me using faith. Now, I would never go around and say, hey, I'm a Christian guy, do business with me. But sometimes that happens, where folks will say to me, you know, I know who you are from a faith perspective. Early on in the church here, I was very much more active. I had various roles, and I have significant business from folks who met me at church. So you don't walk around and say, hey, I got a Bible, open an account with me. But being with Christians has led to some lucrative business, and it's opened doors for me. It's pretty funny. There's a story about, I had this set of Jewish clients on the South Shore of Long Island, and I had done a lot of business with them for 6 or 7 years, and I became very trusted advisor to millions of dollars. And one day they started asking me a question, and I said, oh yeah, we went to church this weekend. And they were like, church? You're Weiss, you're not Jewish? And they never would have done any business with me if they had known I wasn't Jewish. But by then, I was already entrenched in the family, had done very, very well, and they realized that I was just a good guy, and Judeo-Christian values are good business values, and we had a wonderful business. But then I got referred to some of their friends, and I can't believe I'm going to say this on a recorded line, but I actually went to a meeting one time where an individual had a pad, sit down for a meeting, had his pad, just like you might, and he wrote on top of the thing, Michael Weiss, not Jewish. All right? So, how do I use faith? I don't use faith. Faith uses me. Christ uses me. That same boss of mine, when his daughter tried to do some really, really sad stuff, he came to me and said, I know you can help me with this because of your relationship with Jesus. I had a friend of mine, a Jewish guy, show up for my father-in-law's funeral, You remember Pop Schillinger, right? And a Jewish guy came down, and it was a Jesus fest. The funeral was a Jesus fest. And beautiful thing. And at the end of the time, we're walking out, and my friend Paul says to me, so that's who Jesus is. He'd never heard about who Jesus was. So I don't use Jesus. I don't use my faith. I'm just a tool by which some good stuff might be spread around. And it is pretty powerful to say to somebody, because you can do this once you're their financial advisor and they trust you, I'm going to pray for you. Because I manage money for folks all over the world, and bad stuff's happening every day to somebody. Good stuff and bad stuff. You have a large enough population of people you work with, you're going to talk to people that got some bad stuff going on. All right? But once they know who you are, because you've demonstrated ethics and integrity and so on and so forth, you can say that. And it's powerful to say or ask permission, say, I know this is maybe crossing the line a little bit, we don't really talk about this, but prayer and faith is a big part of my life, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to include you in my prayers tomorrow morning when I get up and talk to Jesus. So, I don't use my faith, it uses me.
So we talked about paying yourself first. We talked about 401ks, IRAs. Let's talk about tithing. Uncle Sam wants 15 to 30%, 40%, 50%. God only wants 10. How important is it to tithe? And then let me ask this question. Is it before or after taxes?
So, I'm Clive Calver's financial advisor. And I talk to him all the time. And I'm also Joel Eitz's financial advisor. And I have advised almost all the pastors for the last 25 years as a little pro bono thing that we do for my group, right? And so about 15 years ago, Clive comes to me and goes, Michael, we need to take this up to about 12%. And I'm like, what do you mean take it up to 12? You're getting 10. What do you mean? And he says, I found out that in the United States, you get to deduct that interest. And it's actually possibly deductible, so you're getting money back, so you need to give that money back to God. And I told him, I said, Clive, you're wrong. So here's the thing. Here's my perspective on that, and it's very, very difficult, because now all of a sudden you have a finite set of dollars. And this guy in the fancy suit just said, you need to pay yourself first and put some money in your retirement account, 3, 4, 5%. And then I'm about to tell you that, yes, you should put this money into the bucket. And come as close as you can and do the best that you can. Now, I'm going to get myself in trouble with all the people that raise funds around here, but if you have you only have 10% that you can literally scrape out, should you give all 10% of that to God? Probably not. All right? You put a little bit in your retirement account and you do the best that you can. And then work yourself up. All right? Do you need to go from 0 to 10%? Not in my book. And there's been many times early in my career when I first started, didn't have a thing, was having 2 babies and mortgage rates were going up and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes you didn't make 10%. Then you seem to be able to catch up. And I will tell you this, God will be faithful. It's happened in my life a number of times, embarrassingly so. All right? There's a guy, Mr. Buchanan. Does anybody remember Ms. Buchanan? Do you remember Buchanan, who was Clive's mentor? So he's since passed on. And I remember sitting with him one time, and he told me something, which I also wrote down here, because I was anticipating this, is that you can't outbless God. Okay? So if you bless God, and you don't do it because you're saying, God, I'm going to give you 10% and I want you to give me something back. You don't do it that way. But you give to God, and He will multiply that. It will happen. You just have to have the faith to do it. You just have to have the faith to do it.
So one more question, then we're going to hop over to our little rapid fire round. If you had a book, a documentary, a podcast,
Yeah, that's a tough one.
a radio show, a person that you'd like.
I don't really know the answer to that question. I was reading the questions this afternoon in preparation.
Don't you have a podcast?
No,
Not you yourself, but your
no,
company?
my company does. But I would like to defer the answer I read the question this afternoon, and I'm not comfortable, but I'm gonna give you the answer so you can have it for everybody for the next meeting. I get that question a lot, and very seldom do I find myself agreeing with the author, because they're writing into a vacuum. They're saying everybody should do this, all right? And what I'd rather have you do is educate yourself on how things work and then apply them to your life. It's like when Eliza's talking about the young babies and how they formulate words. Not every baby's the same. You're often saying, I watch her too much. Maybe not. You're talking about a child. You're not talking about every child. So you learn the fundamentals and then you apply them to your life. So what I'd rather have you do is learn what is a stock, what is a bond, what is a mutual fund. Why is risk good? What is tax deferral? What is a 401k? What is? Like when you're educating people, you're teaching them how to do, what subject do you teach? Science. So you're teaching them about science. You're not necessarily telling them how to apply it, right? You're teaching them the scientific method, and those are things they're supposed to do and they apply them to their life. So from learning about stuff, I would learn about what is a mutual fund? What is a stock? And then say, okay, how does that apply to me? Right? And I will get something back for the next thing, and I'll email it to you and you can do something, but I don't have a satisfactory answer.
All right, so we're gonna do rapid fire round.
Wait, sorry, there's a couple things before you go rapid that I wrote down and make sure I had. Okay, I only had one point that I hadn't yet covered, but I think I can put it into your rapid fire thing, so go ahead.
No, you could, if you want.
No, I think it will come up.
All right. First car?
My first car? A 1974 AMC Gremlin, black with white racing stripes on it. Ooh. Which I bought from my uncle for $300. Wow. 1980, I bought it in 1980, none of you were born, okay? And he made a deal with me that if I didn't get a ticket for 1 year, he would rebate 25% back. So $60 back. I proceeded to wrap it around a telephone pole and did not get my money back. Yeah, that was my first car. That was my first car accident. It was all bad. But God was good because the young lady that I had dropped off beforehand, the telephone pole came all the way to the passenger seat. And all I have is whiplash for my entire life. She's still alive. So faith doesn't necessarily, I don't necessarily use my faith, but it uses me. Keep going.
First paying job?
So first official paying job I told you about, right? March 31, 1981, my father was a friend of the McDonald's manager, Mr. Self, and got me a job sweeping sidewalks. I had little jobs. I had a little job when I was 16. I had business cards, and my brother and I would use my father's F-150, and we had Mike Weiss moving. And my mom would find clients for me in church, and I would move stuff for them around town, right? And I used to snow blow driveways for $10, right? I always seemed to spend a lot of money on gas and not make any profit, but I made money. But official job, right?
Favorite song?
So my favorite song is. Probably my favorite song is Maggie May by Rod Stewart, but the live version.
Very nice. Favorite hobby?
Fishing. Yeah. Fishing. I'm a fisherman, but also, if faith uses me, I'm a fisher of men. Sometimes.
Do you prefer the ocean or the lake?
So I live on the lake, and people ask me, I get this question a lot because I fish all over the world. And so it doesn't really matter. I want to fish anywhere that I can. Next month, June, I'm going to be in Montana. And if it weren't for COVID, I would spend a lot of time outside the United States fishing. So I will fish wherever I'm given the opportunity to, but if you give me a choice, I'm going to be on a river in Canada with a 12-foot fly rod chasing Atlantic salmon.
So is that your favorite fishing spot?
Probably, yeah. Well, I have two favorite fishing spots, one by myself and one with Linda. So one by myself is because I go there by myself is Quebec to fish the big rivers. And if I'm gonna be with Linda, it's in Cabo San Lucas, because then she can enjoy the beach, and I can go fishing, and then we can spend time together.
Most stressful period in your career?
Career or life?
Career.
Wow. Geez, so that's a professional stress. Interesting. I think the most stressful periods in my life have been the couple of brief moments when I changed employers. In March of 1997, I believe it was, I changed from one firm to another, and because I had a commission job that I mentioned before, I had to ask all my clients to go with me. And so I left a position where I had a business, and I had, over the weekend, I had a chance to, maybe a head start, but I had to try to move that clientele, and that was a very stressful thing. So that would be the most stressful periods. The most stressful period of my life would be basically around my cancer diagnosis.
I thought you were gonna say something along the lines of like 2008, mountain crashes, bubbles.
No, that's when you work harder, but where you rely on your skills and you rely on what you know how to do and your integrity and your ethics and do the right thing, and that carries you through that stuff.
Your most proud moment?
Oh boy. Personally or professionally?
Either.
Most proud moment. Probably so recently, this sounds very braggish, but recently Forbes magazine listed me as one of the top financial advisors in the United States by state. And that was a culmination of 35 years worth of hard work and doing the right thing and education and so on and so forth. And I think that from a professional perspective, that would be it. Yeah.
Favorite place you've traveled?
Oh boy. So with Linda or without Linda? So you've already kind of figured out that I like to go fishing. So my favorite place to have gone is related to fishing, but so back in 2012, I went to a place called Kamchatka. Who knows where Kamchatka is? Anybody here play Risk? Oh boy, you guys are young. So somebody should Google it, but Kamchatka is a closed military province. It's a big 900-mile long peninsula off the eastern coast of Siberia. It's due west of Alaska across the Bering Sea. It's just this big, and it's like the Garden of Eden because nobody's been there ever. And so there's some 400 rivers, only 10 of which have been mapped and fished. And so me and a bunch of guys met there in a place called Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. I practiced saying that over and over. My personal trainer at the time, his wife was Russian, so I practiced for a year of how to say dobre utro and all these different words, which I have since forgotten, about how to say hello, where's the bathroom, all in Russian. But I went there, I got on a Russian military helicopter, got dropped off on a glacier 200 miles from anywhere. We built this, put together our boat, with those big Zodiacs, right? And we floated for a week. It was fantastic. It was like the Garden of Eden. No phone, no fax. I bought a satellite phone, which I never used, and I had a personal locator beacon, and I bought an evacuation insurance policy, because just in case you got hurt there, I have some clients who had family in Moscow, who on the way out, I stopped in Moscow and spent a couple of days in Moscow, who said, if you get sick in Russia, get out of the country. So I bought a special evacuation policy where they would bring a private jet and fly me to Kyoto. So that's my favorite place. By myself, and favorite place with Linda would probably be a couple years ago for Valentine's Day. I took her to Patagonia in Buenos Aires, and we went on a cruise around the tip of South America. So I need to go there again. That was a really special time. But I love to travel. I've taken Eliza to Spain. I love Spain. I've been to Spain 15 times maybe. Spain, I love Paris. I love to travel, a little too much maybe.
I know you love to cook too, and you're a very good cook. You've cooked for me a few times. What's your favorite meal to cook?
Oh man, with Linda or without? No. So my favorite meal to cook is probably definitely some piece of fish that I just caught. So if I just caught a tuna today or yesterday, like when I go to Cabo San Lucas, I go tuna fishing, and I love to cape a tuna, cut it myself, go to the place that we have there, and sashimi, tartare, sear it, whatever you want, and serve it. That's my favorite meal, is the fish that I caught today. So salmon salmon or tuna, whatever the species is of the day.
What is your favorite wine?
Oh,
If you don't know, he's a huge wine.
my favorite wine is the wine that I'm drinking when I'm drinking wine. But in all seriousness, I think that my favorite wine, if I had to drink only one wine, right, you had left, and trying not to be utilitarian about it, not trying to pick a wine that would go with most meals, but just the wine that I like, it would probably be the Italian Amarone. Write it down. It's a Valpolicella is the grape, but yeah, I think, yeah.
Did we get to your question that you
No, we did not. So what I wanted to say is, if you take a look at you see this every now in Reader's Digest or other publications that are short reads, where they talk about what do people who are 90 or 100-year-old have to say when they look back at their lives. And most of those folks have one core theme besides loving more and so on and so forth. It's always about taking risk. So what I would tell you is that I was going to say take more risk with your money. So right now, if you're going to put money into your retirement account, don't buy the 1% guaranteed CD rate. Buy the exciting growth portfolio that's going to grow for 40 years and you might get 10, 12% out of, as opposed to the one where you're only going to get 2, because you have time for it to work. And the world will march forward. Things will grow. All right? But there's other risks I would encourage you to take. All right? Whether it's asking out the pretty girl, or looking for the job promotion, or taking some kind of other thought out risk. Not drunk driving, not driving 110 miles an hour in the snow, not stupid risk, but don't be afraid to take risk. Put yourself out there. Expose yourself a little bit, right? Because lots of times you'll find that let's say you want to introduce yourself to somebody or something like that. You'll feel like, oh, they were waiting for you to say hello, right? When I used to do a lot of coaching and mentoring for folks, when I was in a management role, I used to have these weekly talks with my group about a thing called the comfort zone. And I used to force my people to do something out of their comfort zone and tell me about it next week. So I've been in a sales role for a long time, and sometimes you think, oh, I don't know if that customer will be interested. You're the sales guy, Reese, right? Right? You ever have a customer?
All the time.
Right? Okay, you know where I'm going with this. And you're like, they're going to say no automatically. You don't even want to bother. Mm-hmm. Well, I used to make my people identify who made them uncomfortable. And then after a while, it got to the point where they'd say to me, I got a new person to make myself uncomfortable with. It became like a challenge. And then what happens is your comfort zone got bigger and bigger, and you become more comfortable. When I first started doing this, I remember Miss Jerrock gave me a check for $10,000. She's long gone. $10,000, this lady gave me a check. First client I ever got that gave me a check for $10,000. I literally threw up on my shoes. I didn't know what to do with it. I was 21 years old. And somebody gave me a check for $10,000 and said, invest it. I took it home, put it in a special envelope, and put it under my pillow because I didn't want to lose it before I went to work the next morning because it was after hours. I swear. I never forget it. Right? So I bought some muni bonds, did really well. Today I talked to $50 million worth of assets today. So I was comfortable and petrified with $10,000. Now I'm talking about 50 million. Tomorrow I'm going to talk to former members of the former members of President Reagan, President Bush's administrations about what to do with their money. Some of the most influential people in the world are gonna take financial advice from me tomorrow at 10:30. And they waited in line to get an appointment with me that they asked for a week ago. So your comfort zone needs to grow. Can you imagine 30 years ago me talking to a former ambassador to, I can't say where? You need to find a big customer that you're afraid to ask, all right?
I did that.
All right, keep asking them. And the next time ask them, why aren't you talking to me? All right, but find a comfort zone and put yourself there. So take some more risk. Not stupid risk, but take some risk. Interesting risk. Creative risk, smart risk. Get a mentor and talk about a risk. Maybe it's a God risk. I don't know what it is. But don't be afraid and don't put yourself in a position where you say 60 years from now, I saw this guy, he's long gone, back in 2021, who said I should take some more risk, and I didn't listen to him. Do I know you? Oh. Yeah, I think I've seen you before somewhere. Have you been to one of our, no, okay. She just looks familiar.
I thought you were pointing at me. I'm like,
Yeah, you know me. I haven't had that much coffee. So go ahead.
All right, I think that's about wrapped it up. We can open for questions.
Anything you want.
All right, anybody have a question? Joseph.
Before we were sitting down, and I had asked you about instructional versus identity-based. As we were talking, as you all were talking, I remember you mentioning at the very beginning of your talk about how you're always trying to learn more things. I know that you work as a financial advisor. I know that one of the most difficult things for you is when you're screening resumes and you see that your values are just not quite visible yet in the generation far younger than you at the age where you already had them. When you're so here's my question. When you talk to people who are in various stages of financial investment and you're looking at what risks they're taking and not, do you find that the people who've lived the longest, of those, the ones who've taken the most risk, would you say that those people are more IQ oriented or more EQ oriented, meaning more on the rational side or more on the emotional side when relating to their decisions?
So when we were chatting before, I knew you were going to ask me a question that I probably wouldn't know the answer to.
And I have
And that's okay, because you've said a couple of things I had never really, now you've explained them, I kind of think I got it, but I'd never really thought of that before. So, do I think the folks that have been around for a while and have some success as investors, not as people like me, that they have done better because they were more intellectual about it or more emotional about it?
Yeah.
I would have to say that more intellectual about it. And the reason I would say that is because emotions cause problems in investing. Right? The biggest fear that I have with markets when they go down is that people get emotional about it. They're like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And they get out. When the exact opposite is what they should be doing. They get emotional. So I have this saying that I have with a nephew of mine who I kind of quasi-mentor, you know, David, right? And I always say to David, because he calls me up a lot and he says, hey, what am I gonna do, Uncle Mike? And I always lead with cool heads prevail. So cool heads prevail intellectually, not intellectual like you're some brainiac, right? But thinking out what you're doing is what you should be doing. And to be frank, you asked me before about stress. So when markets are going down, I'm thinking about what we're going to do, and I don't let people emotionally react. All right? And because of that, last March, I was just doing some reviews today with some folks. Last March, we made some moves in portfolios. Some portions of portfolios are up 100, 150% over the last year because we made the right intellectual moves. And by the way, I'm not saying that everybody makes, for the camera, not everybody makes 150% past performance, no indication of future performance, so on and so forth. But sometimes emotions cause people to make the wrong decision. And so EQ loses out to IQ. Does that answer your question? In the back.
Yes.
My name is Pedro.
Hello, Pedro.
Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
So when it comes to a skill set, obviously you've been around a lot of influential people. You've also been around pretty, it sounds like, successful people as well as yourself. What is one trait that I could focus on? Now, obviously, I agree in life you need to have a wide variety of balanced traits and skill sets. But in your profession, what could I develop skill-wise for myself to really be a successful person that you've seen throughout all the people?
So before I answer that question, because that's a great question, thank you. Define success for me, though.
I guess,
What would that successful person look like?
right, I guess financially for me, when I think about, because, I was thinking this was more financial literacy, but success, right, like, every time I see somebody successful, typically financially, I equate as if they're financially successful, they're normally successful in many other areas in their life. Because I have yet to see in my 41 years, somebody who's, besides maybe trust fund babies, that has accrued a large amount of income or wealth, that they weren't successful in love, in relationship. So I don't know.
So I'm going to kind of take a look at your question, right? So I'm asking you to define success. So you defined it only in monetary purposes for me. I would say to you that that successful person isn't just about money. And I think that some of the older folks in the room will attest to that. It's not all just success in life. It's not all just about how much money you have. So I believe that people who are successful in life have a base to them. And that base is based in integrity, honesty, trustworthiness, reliability, so on and so forth. So we would call that table stakes, right? But above and beyond that, I would say that those people are trained, educated, and they've found something that they're specializing in, right? And it's important to have that base, because if you're an unethical thief who doesn't show up on time, you're not going to get a shot. Maybe you get one, but you're not getting a second shot. So integrity, ethics, I've been pounding this into my kids for their entire lives, right? Integrity, integrity, integrity. Your power of your reputation, who you are, what you represent, and what people say about when you're not in the room. But with that as your base, I think that you have to have something that differentiates yourself, right? So some of it is your behavior. Are you on time? Are you, those types of things, dependable? But also, do you have some skill or something that differentiates you? All right? Are you the best at what you do? All right? Like in my case, I've been going to school forever. I still go to school right now. I had this training today. I've been taking modules. It's unbelievable. All right? And so always learning, differentiate yourself. All right? You said that person is successful in something else. Well, they're probably successful in something else because they're really good at it. And a book for you is the book by Malcolm Gladwell's book, Tipping Point. Okay? And you talk about the 10,000 hours. Anybody know about the 10,000 hours?
Professional anything, 10,000 hours.
I'm sorry?
You can be professional at anything in 10,000 hours?
Well, that's not what I'm trying to say, but yes. That's pretty much it. Does anybody know how Bill Gates got to be the best computer programmer and he just happened to be at the right time? It's the 10,000 hours. There's a lot of stories in there. They're all really, really good. Any more questions, please?
All right, last question, Brian.
Mr. Bergen.
Yes. So someone who, combination of really bad decisions and some bad luck in my early adulthood, found myself in a lot of debt, which I'm climbing out of. So what is some advice that you would give to someone who is trying to get out of debt? Because currently I'm coming close to the end of following Dave Ramsey's plan of getting out of debt with Debt Snowball. Would you agree with that type of approach, or would you agree with investing money and then kind of like what Josh was saying earlier?
So, first of all, I'd like to digress for a second. because your dad's Jonathan, right?
Phil.
Phil,
John
Fro, sorry.
Yeah.
So your uncle, but your uncle was hired my son to be a coach at the soccer clinics that he used to have 30 years ago, 25 years ago. And I will tell you that my son showed up late the first day to work. The next day, he was petrified that he would be late again. My son's never been late again. His entire career has never been late because of what your uncle did to make sure my son showed up at Bethel High School to make sure he was on time. And so, just a little point to his family and how those things I talked to you about before, about timeliness and all that kind of stuff, you'd be surprised. So, I'm not familiar with Mr. Ramsey's debt program. I like the idea of getting rid of debt. There's smart debt, there's stupid debt, credit card debt. I don't like credit card debt, but debt's a tool. All right, so after you get done with that, and I congratulate you for making that progress, then start paying yourself first. I think what we're talking about here is a different situation in that Josh probably had, I don't know the circumstances, I don't want to betray any confidences, but usually you have like a 10 or 15 year program where you're paying off a loan, like a mortgage or something like that. And instead of paying a $500 a month, arbitrary number, but instead of paying a $500 payment, he was going to pay 2 payments. And what Michael, my son, was saying is maybe what you do is you put 1 payment here and 1 payment for yourself. All right? So different scenarios. I'm not familiar with Mr. Ramsey's stuff, but I'm thrilled that it's working for you.
It's basically just live very poorly and put everything you can.
All right, so let's do this then. So let's take that payment that you're living poorly on, that you're used to living poorly on, and give yourself back half.
Okay.
So you've just raised your standard of living by some metric, but take that other half. Are you married?
Yes.
Put it in your wife's Roth IRA account. Maybe buy a little bit of variable universal life insurance and a little bit of term insurance. And do you work for the church?
I do.
So the 403B program, that's a 401k that's available to you?
I'm not sure, but.
Yeah, well, my team manages that, right? So I know all about it. You have that. Put it in there.
Okay.
So you just do the math, and you call my partner or my son. Now, I'm not trying to promote anything here. It just happens to be the facts. Call us up. Talk to the guy in the payroll. I can't remember his name right now. And then start paying yourself. All right? So.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This was
That's good.
excellent. Congratulations, everybody.
That's good. I went a little off script, but
No, it's good.